We're now going to talk with some of those who are on assignment in Europe, and later Mike will speak with those who covered stateside. Well, I'd like to welcome April Lewis, who covered Terry Anderson's homecoming, and Bill McCandless, the executive producer in charge of satellite feeds, Jen Simpson, who covered radio and television reporting, and Tom Lowell, the executive producer in charge of tape organization and editing. Welcome, everyone. Well, Terry Anderson's release was certainly a big event which came out of this whole thing, and April, you went to Wiesbaden to cover that. Now, what was it like?
Well, it was absolutely amazing. We arrived in Wiesbaden, and we were at the hospital before he arrived. And just to actually be physically in that place that you've seen on television hundreds and hundreds of times is just outrageous. Almost every major network was there. They had there was military guards, and then the Scipio family were there waiting. And when the helicopter came in, it was like everybody was busy and hustling. There was a lot of commotion. But then when you heard the helicopter coming down, everybody was quiet, and then they started cheering as he stepped out. It was amazing. The whole trip was wonderful. Later on, he gave a press conference, which was absolutely heart-wrenching. Every so often, he'd break down and cry a little bit. And it was just very sad. And it was different because he was among friends, since he worked for the Associated Press. So I think the reporters and journalists that were there treated him very differently than they would have treated the other hostages who had been freed.
Were you nervous to be there with all the other journalists?
You know, at first, when we were first there, it was the idea of it. We were. But then, we went originally with a group of 4. But then, a producer and a professor had to leave. So then it was just myself and another student. And we kind of felt like we were dropped off in the middle of nowhere. We couldn't use the phones. They were so confusing. We did find a lot of people, though, that spoke English, so that was great.
Good.
But we weren't really nervous. It was strange, but it was very good.
Okay, well, and well, Bill, you were the field producer, for that event, but you were also the executive producer in charge of the satellite feeds from the European Summit. Now, how was working on that? How was broadcasting to the whole world?
I mean, it's in terms of coordinating what happens, we had to pick up here in the States and move to another country and deal with new formats of video and different types of tapes and cameras and equipment that we'd never seen before, and do something that none of us had ever done, which is put our stories on a satellite. And to coordinate that, to hit that exact time, to say that you had to be at the truck, the satellite uplink truck, at a specific time because you'd paid this large amount of money to have this satellite time, was overpowering to have to see that deadline, because you knew anybody who just happened to tune in would see what you were doing. We got a lot of assistance from CNN. They gave us some of their extra satellite time. They'd overbooked. A lot of help from the Starbird people, who were worldwide television news. They went out of their way to do anything they could for us.
Now, you worked very closely with Maria Soares, she did a 50-second long stand-up live?
We did a series of stand-ups that, when we weren't running tape live out over the satellite, in other words, sending our stories back to the States, we did a series of stand-ups that would have been sort of EC wrap-up stand-ups. And we tried to simulate a real-world environment with those stand-ups.
Well, why don't we go ahead and take a look at that tape of Maria Soares' stand-up.
The European countries are running out of time, and no one knows if they're going to meet the deadline. Just over 38 hours ago, the 12 European countries met here for the European Summit. The big plan was to discuss the possibility of unifying Europe. This would mean one common currency, one common foreign policy, and no boundaries. Up until this point, the European leaders have come to no final agreements. The only point that has been agreed upon is the common currency. They've also made some steps toward one common defense union. The major hurdle right now seems to be Britain. In most of the issues, the vote is 11-1. Britain versus the rest of the European countries. The European countries say, however, they're ready to go ahead and vote, even without Britain. The major hurdles are yet to be solved, and no one knows what the results will be. As of right now, the journalists have all cleared the press room and entered the press briefing room. There they will wait for the 12 European leaders to come in and hold their press conference. At this conference, they will soon find out just what's going on and whether or not the European countries will meet the summit deadline. Reporting from Maastricht, the Netherlands, I'm Maria Soares.
It must have been really exciting to coordinate all of that.
Yeah, I mean, we simulated, we put the IFB, the earpiece in, so that I could stand in the truck outside in the parking lot and try and simulate what it would be like, what a real producer would be screaming at her, which, slow down, add this, take out this. It was something that everybody was able to take something out of. All the reporters that were there were able to really see how that worked and get a good feel for that.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are many other reporters at the summit. Now, Jennifer, you were working with two mediums, radio and television. You were reporting on the European Summit. Did you run into any problems working with both media?
Yeah. There was difficulties in working with both at the same time because you couldn't rely just on audio or just on visuals. You had to rely on both because you would wind up with two different stories from both of it. And we did have problems with dead batteries, and finding batteries in the Netherlands after 6 o'clock sometimes isn't the easiest thing to do. And in fact, sometimes we really had to make believe on something like that. But it was really interesting to be able to do it for both mediums, because with radio you're working with sound, and you have to incorporate a lot more information in because you don't have any visuals to work with. And for TV you're working with shots and camera angles and things of that nature. So I learned a lot just by seeing the difference between doing it for both. Mm-hmm. It was amazing.
Okay. Now, Tom, you were the executive producer in charge of tape editing and organization. Mm-hmm. And you worked closely with the reporters who were out in the European Summit reporting. Did you run into any difficulties working with the new and foreign TV system?
Oh, yes. I mean, if you could imagine having to change cars 3 times just to drive down to the corner store, it was something like that. We got involved with doing a television news show. A Dutch cable station asked us to put up a half-hour news program for them every night. So in addition to shooting tape in one format for the United States stations, we were shooting tapes in a second format, the European format, for the Dutch program. We were shooting some tape in the European format for the satellite. So in some instances, we literally would have to have 3 camera crews on a single story. Then the tapes would come back in-house, and we'd be shuffling through the deck to figure out what we were going to edit on what system, and what was going back to the US, and what was going up on the satellite, and what the needs were of the television show we'd been asked to do. So it was a never-ending merry-go-round of tapes. By the end, we all felt like we were wading hip-deep through a sea of videotapes, even when we got back here to the U.S. and had to go back over our work and see what we had.
Mm-hmm. So I suppose if you went back and did it again, you would know a lot more this time.
Oh, certainly. Operating in a foreign environment is tough for any news organization. I mean, even the big organizations, the networks get over there and they run into difficulties. We were 2,000 miles away from our support staff, the great technicians here at the school that work with us that keep our equipment up, so when we had problems, there was no one there. There's a lot of things we do differently, but a lot of these problems you can't foresee either. It's the type of thing that's part of this business. You'll be out in the field and something will go wrong, or your tape will jam or whatever. That's unfortunately the nature of the news business.
Well, aside from the problems, what was your best or most favorite experience?
Just the experience of being in Europe itself, I think. And I'll speak for myself, but I know a lot of people on the trip said that the opportunity to view America through European eyes and to watch really the birth of almost a new United States was fantastic. It sort of changed your outlook on the world, to be across the ocean and to look back on the States and to work with a different culture and a different people, different values in a different environment. It was a fantastic working experience, and it was a fantastic educational experience. I mean, you couldn't ask for any more. We sort of wrapped it all up into one thing. Being at the MAC, doing the live shot, being there with the European leaders, it was all super.
Well, I mean, everything went really well. And thank you all for joining us and sharing your experiences with us. We'll now take a break. After the break, Mike Bodette will talk to those who work stateside. Stay tuned.
are now back, and with two of the journalists who are on assignment here at Stateside, I'd like to welcome Debbie Grau. She was in charge of office management, editing, and also tape submissions, and we're also here with Anne-Marie Boucher. She handled PR for the project and mostly concerning the whole Terry Anderson release. Let me just start off by asking you, Debbie, you were stateside. A lot of people might say, stateside, what are you doing here? What was involved with being on the stateside?
A lot of it involved being there for the people who were in Maastricht and Wiesbaden. They needed to keep communication of what was happening with the stations who were taking the feeds, the packages. They wanted to know who wanted what, if we got any requests, if we got the scripts, was there any more information on Terry Anderson, because we were the first source of information for them, or at least I think we were. I'm not quite sure, but we were able to help them with information by faxing them AP wire and just telling them what we heard on the news. And
so, Anne-Marie, you feel that your position was a worthwhile and there was a point to your position on the stateside?
Definitely. We learned a lot about production work. I think we did a lot more production even without the videotape and actually going out on shoots. We learned what goes behind the scenes. Not the taping and the editing, but all the phone calls you have to make.
All right. Debbie, I heard that you actually set up a bed almost in Marcia's office and were sleeping there at night. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your experience in the journalism office.
There are quite a few nights that I got stuck there at 2:30 in the morning or 5 in the morning, and I crawl up in Marcia's chair behind her desk and stick my feet on the radiator because it was cold, and I bury my head underneath my coat, and I'll leave messages for people to wake me up at a particular hour and try to be there for the people in Maastricht when they wake.
What happened the night Terry Anderson was released?
That was around 3:30 in the morning, and well, we started off during the day, so it wasn't crazy for us. And Anne-Marie, she immediately faxed Marcia, who is the news director on that side, and informed her to remove her bracelets. And then at 4:30 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning actually, we heard it was confirmed. So we called them, we faxed them and called them. They called us. They had us run around, try to get a key to the radio station and get AP wire and fax them. We faxed them all the information we could, and then for them we went back to our apartments to record Eye Opener and try to make contacts with them.
Was this happening all during the middle of the night?
For us it was. For them it wasn't.
So did the time difference pose a problem?
Some ways, yes. During the day it was really quiet for us, and then around 8 o'clock, just when they were settling down, 8 o'clock our time, it was maybe, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock their time. I lost track, but just when they were settling down was when we were getting ready to go home, thinking our day is over, but it wasn't. It was just picking up for them, and same with at 2:30 in the morning when they're waking.
So, Anne-Marie, you also had kind of job change.
Yeah.
It shifted gears middle of the road when the whole Terry Anderson thing came out. What exactly was involved with your PR work?
Well, when we heard Terry Anderson was going to be released, we immediately started to put together a press release, which we faxed out on the event that he would get released in the near future. And we faxed it to most of the stations in Boston, all the stations in Boston, and the newspapers. We went on the avenue that we had the first Free Terry Anderson committee, and it was made up by student journalists. That was our hook to get the media to cover Emerson College. We also used how the students were covering the MEC and the summit in Europe as another little pull. We got a lot of attention, and we did a wonderful job covering the press, taking their questions.
So, I guess overall, how do you think this whole project pulled off? It seems like quite a feat for a bunch of college students to pull off. How do you think that it happened?
I can't believe it still. Every time I tell people about it, are you sure you did that? I don't know. I don't believe it still. I'll have to wait and see how I feel in a little while.
What's your fondest memory?
Being awoken at 3:30 in the morning by my two friends. They called me to tell me that Terry Anderson was really released, for real, at 3:30. And it was quite a shock.
Debbie, how about you? What's your fondest memory of the whole experience?
That it's over. No. One of my fondest memories was waking her up at 3:30 in the morning. I was one of them, and the other producers. pretending to be a television station. So she started panicking. She's like, all right, I'm right there, I'm on my way. And that was one of the funniest moments. Each day it was different because there were so many accomplishments and they were all great in its own way.
So it sounds like this was a learning experience, but was it a fun experience?
Yeah, trying, tiring, and fun.
That's good. And Anne-Marie, how about you? What did you learn from this? It was fun, but did you learn anything from all of this?
I've learned that organization is the most important key, and communication, and not getting frustrated with the people that you're working with. Work as a team, not individually.
That's great. Just another thing I wanted to touch upon that I just remembered. I heard that you had to do a little bit of extra editing one day. Maybe you can just quickly tell us what happened there.
Overnight editing. There was a problem. We sent him off to Federal Express. I came back to the school in the office and briefly looked at him and noticed that there were black glitches in between them. It was a problem with the edit suite, so we quickly corrected them.
Well, it sounds like you definitely had quite a job in here, and so I want to thank you both for being with us here today. And when we return, we'll have a special holiday treat from the other side of the Atlantic. Back in a moment. Santa Claus is coming to town, in fact, all over the world. In the Netherlands, one day is set aside for Zwarte Piet, just in case the children can't wait for Santa's presents.
Emerson reporter Jennifer Simpson had a special assignment catching up with Santa's helper.
He's excited, he's scared, and a little unsure. That's because he suspects Zwarte Piet has come to school in the middle of the night. Here in the Netherlands, Piet is Santa Claus's special helper. These are Peter's hands. He's come down the chimney to reward good children with small gifts, or to take naughty children home with him to Spain. So even though the children are excited, they are unsure of what their fate may be. One kindergarten teacher in Maastricht, Marika van der Boschberg, has the whole day planned out.
The children take a shoe with them to school, and we're going to sing lots of songs. And then the day after today, they find presents in their shoes.
These gifts are just the first of many to come. Zwarte Piet was here today, and now the children are looking forward to Santa on Thursday. He'll be here in 2 days, so for now, these gifts will have to hold the children over until then. I'm Jennifer Simpson, reporting from Maastricht, the Netherlands.
Thank you for letting us share our Emerson European project with you.
We'd also like to thank everyone who made this show possible. I'm Mike Bodette.
And I'm Michelle Harash. Thank you for joining us.